welcome to the Millennial Book Junkie. My name is Monique, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in April of 2025, and I'm also going to be talking about the books that I plan to read in May of 2025. I'm going to do kind of like a combination video of my April wrap-up and my May TBR, or these days, my May hopefuls, so let's get into it. I would say April was a really good reading month. I had nothing below 4 stars, which I think is really great. I read 4 books, and all of them I actually own. So I'm gonna start with the lowest to the highest in terms of ranking. So the first book I read in April, well, the lowest ranked was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I say lowest ranked, but this was not a bad book. I gave it 4 stars. This book was a thriller. It was really good, actually. It is about a woman who sees her son commit a crime on Halloween, and the next day she wakes up and it's the day before the crime. And then every day she wakes up, she is in the past, even further and further away from the crime. So the entire novel, she's trying to figure out, like, why is each day moving forward in the past? What am I supposed to be doing in the past to save wherever she was in the future? And how does she get back to her present day? How does she like get out of this weird time loop that she's in? And the book basically follows her in figuring this out as she goes back further in time, trying to figure out, like, am I supposed to come up with the reason why my son decided to kill someone? Am I supposed to go back in the past and like stop this murder from happening? Like, she goes on this crazy journey, and of course it's hard to explain to people what's going on with her because they think she's bananas, you know, like they don't know, you know, she's in the past. And sometimes the only thing that helps convince people that she's from the future is if she tells them something about themselves that happens in the future, or tells them or shows them something that's about to happen because she knows it's going to happen. So the whole book, we're following her, this woman named Jen, and her son Todd, and then her husband Kelly, and she's just trying to figure out why her son Todd kills someone. And so for me, this book read really quickly. It was like a very easy to read book. And it kept me really just like, what is going on here the whole time? I would say the reason why I gave it a 4 though is not because it wasn't a good story or it wasn't fun. I think for me, it was just kind of because I didn't feel any emotional connection to the characters or the story. Some thrillers are like that for me, like they're just like a quick fun read, but then I don't really like have any connection and I don't really like think about the characters afterward. And also I think because there was some slang and different things said in here that might have made more sense to a UK audience, and I'm in the US, so I think that also kind of prevented me from connecting with it as much as maybe I wanted to. But overall, I thought it was a really fun read. I will also say one thing that might have also contributed to me not having a connection to this book was also because I was reading this book in like a lot of loud places. I was doing some traveling, so I was reading it at the airport, I was reading it on a plane. And sometimes when I read, I like to be in like quiet so I can really connect with the novel and the story. And I didn't really get a chance to read this one in like nice, quiet, cozy places. So that's probably also what led to why I didn't connect with it as much. But overall, I felt like the story was great and the pacing was great. I gave it a solid 4. The next book I read was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This book follows a young woman who works as a caretaker, and she decides to work as a caretaker for this house, which is a huge mansion house that's owned by this family called the Hope family. That's their last name, Hope. And in the early, or I guess late 20s, early 30s, this family who lived in this mansion had 3 murders take place. A young girl and her parents all died in this house in the late 20s, and there's only one surviving daughter. So our main character, who is a caretaker, is assigned to look after this one surviving daughter. Her name was Lenora Hope, who lives in this mansion. And so the main character, whose name is Kit, comes along and has to take care of this older woman who has like long been accused of killing her sister and her parents. And this book takes place in the 80s, which is kind of cool because it's, you know, not in today's times. So they have different technology, different music, different books that they talk about. So that was really cool. And so basically this young caretaker, Kit, comes to take care of Lenora Hope in this mansion that's like crumbling on the edge of a cliffside very slowly over time. And Lenora cannot speak, she cannot move her body, she can only move her left hand. So she communicates with Kit with her left hand, you know, tapping once for yes, two for no type of thing. And you can really only ask Lenora yes or no questions. And so Kit is, you know, a little nervous to be working in this mansion, taking care of this woman who was accused of killing her family. And so she goes and, you know, creepy things start happening. She starts seeing things in, you know, Lenora's room at night, you know, which couldn't possibly be happening because Lenora can't move. And Lenora eventually like leads Kit towards this typewriter and like types with her hand like, hey, I want to tell you my whole story of what happened. And so Kit is led on this whole journey of like trying to, you know, figure out what happened to Lenora Hope, get to the truth, you know, why she killed her family, you know, and of course there's tons of twists and turns along the way. So this book was a lot of fun. It was my very first Riley Sager book. And I gave it a 4.5 because it was really fun, really incredibly twisty, like twist after twist. It just went on and it was really entertaining. And I also felt like when I first started reading it, it reminded me of like the R.L. Stine books that I would read as a kid, because when I was younger, you know, the R.L. Stine books like Goosebumps and Fear Street, they just like really captured me from the very first page. And each page after that, I was just always hooked and the story just moved. And I really felt like that when I read this book. I was like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of, you know, reading scary books from when I was a kid. So that I really liked. But I didn't give it a 5 because, once again, I don't know if there was something with just me not connecting, but like, I for some reason couldn't be like, this was a 5-star. I wasn't like fully captivated by the story or the characters. I thought it was so fun and so twisty, like I said, but there's something that just held me back from wanting to give it a 5-star. I don't know, I can't really figure out what it was. I also didn't really like the fact that there were so many twists at the end. Like, I love twists, I really do. Like, you know, when the first one comes, you're like, oh my gosh, and the second one, you're like, oh my gosh. But then when there's like 3 more twists after that, it kind of cheapens things for me sometimes, and I'm like, are we just twisting everything now to try and make this like a really fun book? Which it was a really fun book, but I don't know if I need that many twists. But I did really enjoy it, and like I said, I moved through it really quickly. It kept me hooked. I did have one question for those of you that have read this book. I'm not gonna do any spoilers here for anyone who hasn't, but I found like this one part of the book where I was really confused, and I don't know if it's a plot hole. So yeah, there's this one part that I'm confused about. So maybe I'll share that in a comment for anyone who has read this book, but I don't want to talk about it here because of spoilers. But yeah, maybe I'll leave a comment about it and say this is a spoiler zone, so don't read it, but I have a question about this. But overall, it was a very fun book. I enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a really fun, twisty novel. It's time to get to the 5 stars. The first 5-star book that I read in April was Codename Helene, and this one was so good. It was a book club pick that I read with my family book club, and it's by Ariel Lawan, and she has multiple other books that also look really good. But this one is kind of like a historical fiction novel. I sometimes read books that are outside of like my favorite horror thriller genre when I'm, you know, reading books with my family, and this one was actually really good. It was about a woman who was from Australia in the 1930s, and she was living in Paris during World War II. And it turns out that she kind of has a knack for wanting to help people and be kind of like a spy. And so she's living in Paris, and it kind of talks about, you know, how she meets her husband, you know, her personal life. but she's also a journalist or she's a writer, and she writes for this publication in France. And she actually has the opportunity to interview Hitler. And this is based on a real story. It's about a woman named Nancy Wake. And so she talks about in the beginning of the book kind of like how she interviewed Hitler and how she even goes to one of Hitler's rallies just to kind of observe because she is a writer. Of course, back in the day, she could not have her name associated with the pieces she was writing because she was a woman, but she was a writer nonetheless. So anyway, eventually she decides that she's going to join the French resistance against the Germans that are occupying France. And she becomes kind of a spy, and she has code names, and she helps the French resistance who are like hiding out in various parts of France. She helps them gather weapons and kind of like helps them in their ambushes when the Germans come. And she gives them food and just kind of like gives them supplies. And obviously she has help, but she's kind of like a spy and helping the French resistance through all this. But in all this, you know, she's separated from her husband, and, you know, she didn't have to go into this line of work, but she does. You know, a lot of women, you know, in France at the time, you know, some were part of the resistance and some were like, well, the Germans are occupying France, like, I'm just gonna go over here and pretend like nothing's happening and hide, you know? So it's like women, you know, weren't given a ton of options, but she decides that she's gonna go and be this spy and help people. And I found it so incredibly inspiring and empowering for a woman to do this because, you know, these French troops, they were all men. And so she had to really struggle to be a leader among men and, you know, be strict. And they had to listen to her, which is not easy in general, but I can't imagine in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And so this novel really tells her story. And it, like I said, her name was Nancy Wake, and she actually was not even really like praised for this work for a long time, you know, and she really helped the resistance in France, you know, during that whole era. And it was really, really emotional, and the story was pretty graphic at times because they did share, you know, what the Nazis were doing to French people and Jews. And it was very, like I said, graphic and very, very depressing. But it was also really informative, and I really like learning about World War II. I just feel like that was, I mean, obviously it was a horrible part of our history, but, you know, I think it's really good to learn about that stuff. So I enjoy books that center around, you know, World War II. I also read The Women by Kristen Hanna. I really enjoyed that. I like learning about our history. So yeah, this was very, very powerful. If you're interested in a historical fiction novel about a very, you know, a woman who was just quite frankly a badass in World War II, I highly recommend picking this one up. I gave it 5 stars. I cried. It was really, really good. The next 5-star I read was Promise Not to Tell by Jennifer McMahon. And oh my goodness, I loved this book so much. It was kind of like split in 2 stories, like in the past, in the 1970s, and then in present day, which is actually early 2000s. But it's about this woman who returns, she's from Seattle, but she returns home to take care of her ailing mother who is struggling with Alzheimer's. And she goes home to Vermont to help her mom. But while she's there, a young girl is murdered. And not only is she murdered, but she's like pretty graphically murdered. She's like kind of tied up, naked, like it's kind of graphic. But this young woman is murdered. And so our main character, Kate, is left with dealing with her own history, you know, in Vermont. Obviously she had moved to Seattle, but she's back. But she grew up in Vermont. And when she was little, a little girl her age died the same exact way as the girl in present day. And so obviously there's a lot of questions. The young girl who died in the 70s was bullied relentlessly. They used to call her the potato girl. She was poor, you know, she had a farm with potatoes and eggs and things like that, but they used to really bully her, kids, you know, in town at school, and they called her the potato girl. It was really, really sad. But, you know, she died. And so now suddenly 20, 30 some odd years later, this other little girl dies, and everyone's kind of looking at Kate, our main character, who was friends with the potato girl back when the potato girl died, like, hey, you know, what is going on here? So basically Kate is there to care for her mother, and she's also trying to figure out what happened to this little girl who also died the same way. And we get this whole history of like her time in Vermont, you know, because the story goes back and forth between past and present. So we learned about her time with the potato girl, and then we also, you know about her present day and the way the town looks at her. And it was just, I don't know if you've ever read any Jennifer McMahon novels. My first one by her was The Winter People that I loved, but this book was so good. I can honestly say that it is probably the best book that I read this year. And I've read a lot of great books this year, but this one was a 5-star because it hit all the points for me, because I really like to emotionally connect with the story and the characters, and this story brought that for me. And I also like things to be scary and haunting, and this had a lot of scary and haunting moments. So this also, I found out, was, I believe, Jennifer McMahon's first book, and it was so good. I mean, if this was her debut novel, which was like early 2000s, I can understand like why she became such a successful author after this one, because the way that she tells the story and the haunting things that happen in this book, it kind of reminded me of Stephen King a little bit. Like, weird stuff happens in Stephen King movies and books, and she kind of introduces that weird stuff in the same type of way. I can't explain it, but there was a scene where an old man was like taking on the voice of like a younger child, and I was like, that is creepy. And I was like, this reminds me of like Stephen King or something, like from It. I don't know. It was creepy, and I just love like stories that are both like powerful and like the characters, you can connect with them on an emotional level, but I also love the scares, and this had all of that. And it also had good twists too, and it didn't have too many twists, and it had me scratching my head, you know, like, what is going on here? And it's a short novel. It's only like 250 pages. It was just so good, and I just feel emotional when I look at this book, because I just had such a good time with it. Like, I just feel like if you like emotionally haunting stories, this is a good one. Okay, so those are the books that I read in April, and I read 4 total, and I actually, like, Wrong Place, Wrong Time and Promise Not to Tell, those were like random picks I picked in my last video about, like, from my TBR basket. I like closed my eyes and picked those 2 out, and I'm so glad that I did, because Promise Not to Tell was amazing. So for this month, I already planned the books that I'm gonna read in May, so I'll share those with you. I kind of strategically planned one of them because there's a movie coming out and I really want to read the book. So let's get into what I'm going to read in May. The first book I'm reading in May is called Solito by Javier Zamora. It's about a young boy who's living in El Salvador. It's a memoir, and he travels to the United States, and it's basically about his journey trying to get into the US, and it's like a 9-week journey. He's traveling with people he doesn't know, and it talks about his life in El Salvador and then his journey to the US. And I'm currently like a little more than halfway through it, and it is really good. If you didn't know, I'm Hispanic, and so a lot of my parents and grandparents were originally from Mexico, so it kind of like hits deep with me because it's kind of emotional to hear about how, you know, my family came to America, and then, you know, this little boy who's just trying to get to America to meet his parents who are already there waiting for him, and he's 9 years old. So it's a true story. Like I said, it's a memoir about his journey, and I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to share more about it once I'm done reading it. But this is the first book that I plan to read in May. And if you hadn't guessed from the subject matter, it is another book club pick with my family. I usually don't read a lot of memoirs. I usually tend to stick to a lot of fiction, but this one is pretty good, and it's what I'm gonna read in May. The next book I'm gonna read in May, I am really excited about because this movie is coming out May 9th, and I'm gonna do a book movie comparison. It's Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare. I'll say Cesare, that kind of sounds kind of cool, but I don't know if that's the way you say his name. Clown in a Cornfield I picked this one up recently at an airport bookstore because I was traveling recently, and the movie comes out on May 9th. I can't wait. So let's see what this one's about. I kind of already took a peek and read a couple chapters just because I couldn't wait. I'm really excited to see the movie. So here's what it's about. Quinn Maybrook just wants to make it to graduation, but she might not make it to morning. When Quinn and her father moved to a tiny town with a weird clown for a mascot, they were looking for a fresh start. But ever since the town's only factory shut down, Kettle Springs has been cracked in half. Most of the town believes that the kids are to blame. After all, the juniors and seniors at Kettle Springs High are the ones who threw the party where Arthur Hill's daughter died. They're the ones who set the abandoned factory on fire and who spend all their time posting pranks on YouTube. They have no respect and no idea what it means to work hard. For the kids, it's the other way around. And now Kettle Springs is caught in a constant battle between old and new, tradition and progress. It's a fight that looks like it will destroy the town. Only one homicidal clown, nice rhyming there, with a pork pie hat and a red nose decides to end it for good. Because if your opponents all die, you win the debate by default. Killer clowns is something I am into, like not in real life, but like into on TV and in books. I actually watched the Killer Clowns movie when I was 5 or 6 years old. I don't know if you remember, it's from the 80s. Early 90s. I think it's called Killer Clowns from Space or something like that. That was a very interesting flick, but I'm just into anything scary. And I saw the trailer for this and I was like, that is a book. I need to pick up that book. I need to read it and do a comparison. I think it's going to be really fun. This book actually also has, I think, a couple other books. I think there's sequels, like a 2 and a 3. So I don't know if I'll read all the sequels, but I definitely want to read this one. I'm so excited and I can't wait. Clown in a Cornfield? Yeah, that would be so fun. I was thinking that too, but I wasn't gonna say anything. The next book I plan to read is Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Kavanagh. And I've heard so much about this book. My aunt read this book. She couldn't put it down and I cannot read this. I cannot wait to read this book. I bought this one when I went to the Amy Tintera book event at Zibby's Bookshop in Santa Monica. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read it. I've heard it's very good. Let's see what it's about because I forget. One dark evening on New York City's Upper West Side, 2 strangers meet by chance. Over drinks, Amanda and Wendy realize they have much in common, especially loneliness and the intense desire for revenge against the men who destroyed their families. As they talk into the night, they come up with the perfect plan. If you kill for me, I'll kill for you. Damn. In another part of the city, Ruth is home alone when the beautiful brownstone she shares with her husband, Scott, is invaded. She's attacked by a man with piercing blue eyes who disappears into the night. Will Ruth ever be able to feel safe again while the blue-eyed stranger is still out there? As these storylines collide in this Hitchcockian and heart-racing psychological thriller, Kill for Me, Kill for You grips you and doesn't let you go until the shocking conclusion. Really excited for this. Like I said, can't wait. Have you read this one? Let me know. The next book I'm gonna read in May is Hex by Thomas Old Hoevelt. This book actually was recommended to me by another booktuber who reads a lot of scary books. And what really intrigued me about this one is that it sounds like the show WandaVision, but like horror style. I don't know if you've seen WandaVision, but I'm pretty sure this book is about a witch that has a hex on an entire town. But let's read the inside. Whoever is born here is doomed to stay till death. Whoever settles never leaves. Welcome to Black Spring, the seemingly picturesque Hudson Valley town haunted by the Black Rock Witch. See, I told you, it's haunted by a witch. A 17th century woman whose eyes and mouth are sewn shut. Oh, I love it. Muzzled, she walks the streets and enters homes at will. Oh my God, that's so freaky. She stands next to children's beds for nights on end. Okay, I'm already scared. Everybody knows that her eyes may never be opened or the consequences will be too terrible to bear. The elders of Black Spring have virtually quarantined the town by using high-tech surveillance to prevent their curse from spreading. WandaVision. Frustrated with being kept in lockdown, the town's teenagers decide to break their strict regulations and go viral with the haunting. But in doing so, they send the town spiraling into dark medieval practices of the distant past. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. This terrifying, all too close for comfort modern novel launched Thomas Old Houvelt into the company of genre masters like Joe Hill and Peter Straub, and Hex remains one of the most exciting horror debuts of the last decade. I cannot wait for this book. I'm telling you, I see it on my shelf, I see it in my basket, I see it on my nightstand, and I'm just like, I can't wait to dig into this. I'm so excited. So this is gonna be the 4th book that I'm gonna read in May, and I just cannot wait. So thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know if you read any of the books I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. I think I will leave a comment about the question I had about The Only One Left, because I'm really, like, I can't get it out of my head, and I want to talk to someone who's read the book. So I think I will leave a comment below about that, like, plot hole that might not even be a plot hole. But thank you so much for watching, and if you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!